Okay, I think we are all set up. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't want that on here. But I think we are all set up. I think we're set and ready to go here. Um, just take a few minutes, let everybody move their way into the chat and into the platforms and everything. But we'll make sure, see if everything's working here. Hope everybody's having a good evening. Let's see. Just getting a few things together here and making sure everything is working. So, hope everybody's having a great evening. Got a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, as per usual. If you're here, sound off in the chat. I want to hear from you. And as always, if you have any questions, any comments, anything you want to talk about, you can leave that in the chat as well. Come over here, just making a few other. All right, that should be working. Evening, Kathy. How are you? Glad to have you on board. Let's see. There we go. I think the chat is working now over on Facebook. We're live tonight on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, wherever you're watching tonight. Sound off in the chat. Let me know you're here. You might hear some stuff in the background. That's my dog Daisy, our puppy, trying to get one of our schnauzers to play. So she's a little bit loud. I apologize if you can hear that over the stream, which I'm pretty sure that you can. Danette on TikTok says, thanks for all you do. Thanks for watching, Danette. Appreciate it. All right, let me pull up my rundown here because we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about tonight. As always, I've got a whole list of things. But on the show tonight, we're going to talk about Senator Mike Lee trying to get the SAVE Act passed, and he did something really gross again today. We're going to talk about Senator John Curtis. He's done a couple of things that have caught people's attention. One, he said he's going to support the nomination of Todd Blanche to become the Attorney General, meaning Republicans only need one more vote to confirm him as Attorney General. Also, he came up with he's got an immigration reform proposal that Republicans are not happy about. So we'll talk about that. I want to talk about what's happening with Deidre Henderson. She again sounded off about the Trump administration's efforts to undermine elections, and she seems to be the only person here in Utah, the only elected official here in Utah, who seems to be trying to make things work for the voters. So we've got all sorts of stuff to talk about tonight. And again, if you have a question, a comment, anything you want to talk about, please sound off in the chat. Leave it in the chat and I will get to it as soon as we can. So, all right, I think we got everything set. I just had to hit a few more buttons and we are ready to go. So, evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. My name is Brian Schott. I'm the publisher and managing editor of Utah Political Watch. You'll find us online at utahpolitics.news. And welcome to our regular Tuesday live stream where we talk about what's happening in Utah politics, and I take your questions and your comments as well. I'm an independent journalist. That means I have no corporate support. I have no billionaires writing me checks. This is my common spiel. I rely 100% on my readers, my listeners, my viewers to fund this enterprise. And, it's working so far. People who appreciate the kind of coverage that I do are helping to make it possible. And you can do that as well. A couple of things you can do. You can go to utahpolitics.news, sign up for my newsletter. That's free. You can also subscribe, become a paid subscriber, which is $5 a month or $55 a year. Pretty easy. And if you don't want to do a subscription right now, I understand that. The economy's not great. But if you want to throw a few bucks in the tip jar, all of it goes to help making this enterprise, Utah Political Watch, which is right over my shoulder here, right there, all goes to making it possible. And those of you who are already supporters, I appreciate it very much. And those of you who are thinking about it, this is as good a time as any. Love to have you on board. Okay, so we are live tonight, and just a bunch of stuff I want to talk about. But again, don't forget, if there's something you would like to bring up, feel free to leave it in the chat, and I will get to you as quickly as possible. And we're live on, like I said tonight, we're live on YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, and Facebook. So let's talk about what's happening. This came across my feed right before I cooked dinner this evening. And Senator Mike Lee, still desperate to try and pass the Save America Act. It's not on the agenda. Like, they're in their last week before they break for their summer recess, so everybody can go home and campaign. It's not on the agenda of the Republican majority. This bill, as you know, which is essentially a voter suppression bill, he claims it's voter security, but it's voter suppression. And what it does is it makes it so that people have to show proof of citizenship to register to vote. Everybody would have to re-register to vote under this bill. And you'd have to show proof of citizenship. But the only things that would be acceptable for proof of citizenship would be your driver's license. There's only 5 states that have the real ID driver's licenses. Utah's not one of them. So the only things you could show as proof of citizenship are either your passport or your birth certificate. And if the names on your passport and your birth certificate don't match, you've got a problem. And experts say that this bill could potentially disenfranchise 10% of American voters. So it's a voter suppression bill. But anyway, it's not on the agenda to be voted on with the Republican majority in the Senate as they get ready to break for the August recess. There's some people who want to try to sneak it into a budget reconciliation bill. Doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite for that. I don't think they have the votes for that. And Senator Mike Lee has been, really pushing hard for this. He's been annoying a lot of his colleagues. A lot of reports about how he's been annoying his colleagues, attacking them on social media for not supporting this bill. He doesn't have even 50 votes. Right now he needs 60 to get past the filibuster. And as we've said before, he doesn't even have 50. So anyway, today he went on social media, and this I think it's kind of gross. I think it's really kind of gross. He posted on social media that he thought that he invoked the name of Charlie Kirk to try to get the bill passed. He posted, "I suspect Charlie Kirk would want us to remain in session and either 1, pass the Save America Act through budget reconciliation, or 2, require filibustering senators to speak and keep debating it until it passes." Now, this is the second dead person that Senator Lee has cynically invoked trying to get this piece of legislation passed. The other one was Lindsey Graham. Like, within hours that we learned of Graham's death, Lee was on social media saying that Lindsey Graham would want them to pass this bill. Which, it's really kind of gross that he's doing that. But he's leaving no stone, pulling out all the stops to get this thing passed. It's a priority for the Republicans who, if you look at you can see why they want to do it. All the polling shows that they are in deep trouble come November. Now, a lot can change between now and November, that's for certain, but polling this week, President Trump is deeply unpopular. His approval rating dropped to 34% in one poll, 32% in another poll. And that's right around the low that he had right after the January 6th insurrection attempt during his first time in office. His approval ratings dropped that low. And so he is historically unliked. And he is going to be an anchor dragging the Republicans down. And so why not try to make it harder to vote? Why not try to make it much harder for people to vote, disenfranchising 10% of the population but rather, because they really haven't done anything that this Congress hasn't done anything much to improve people's lives. I mean, if you're wealthy, they've done a lot to improve your lives with the massive tax cuts that they passed last year. But, the budget cuts, DOGE, they killed a lot of the food safety handling, and now we've got diarrhea lettuce across the country. And just today, Chipotle is recalling jalapenos because of a potential salmonella outbreak. And, the food safety inspections were cut back by DOGE. The funding for that was eliminated by DOGE, and RFK Jr. Got rid of some of those programs as well, because apparently we didn't need them. And so now we have diarrhea lettuce and salmonella jalapenos. Just lovely. Just lovely. Minivan Man on TikTok says, yes, Charlie Kirk would want this passed. It is truth. How do you know? How do you know? Charlie Kirk is no longer with us. And this is just a cynical attempt by Senator Lee to try and get this piece of bill passed, to get this piece of legislation passed. Nobody can know. Charlie Kirk is no longer with us. So I saw this and I was just like, that is gross. That is just another. But should we really be surprised? I mean, it's been more than a year since Senator Mike Lee posted those really disgusting jokes about the Hortmans in Minnesota who were killed by someone who came to their house and shot them to death. And he's never apologized. He still has not apologized for that. So I don't know why I'm surprised, why I would be surprised that Senator Mike Lee would be doing something gross like this to try and get his legislation passed. But at the end of the day, it's really gross. It's just ugh. Makes me feel really slimy. But it's a slimy kind of thing. So, but speaking of election stuff, Deidre Henderson, she has been great on Threads. If you're not following her Threads account, which is it's just her name, Deidre Henderson. It's not her official account, but if you're not following her Threads account, you're missing some good stuff, because she is really pushing back against a lot of the attempts by the Trump administration to get a hold of voter rolls in an attempt to kick people off the voter rolls. With that, and we've talked about that before, but that's what they're trying to do. She's also pushed back against a lot of these claims about a rigged election. The election is rigged against Republicans. But I'm going to see if I can bring these up here, and hopefully it won't cause any problems. But this is the first thing that she posted. This was actually from today. A federal court dismissed the Justice Department's lawsuit against Colorado, trying to seek their full unredacted voter rolls. And that's the 20th straight lawsuit that they have lost from this. They've lost 20 lawsuits. And she wrote today, 0 and 20 for the Justice Department against state election officials. This is a sinking ship for DOJ. Also, Colorado and New Mexico, whose cases have now both been dismissed, are in the same federal court district as Utah. Our case is still pending, but I have no reason to believe Utah's outcome will be any different than the 20 states in a row that have had rulings in their favor. And I think that she's right. Utah and Colorado were both sued by the Trump administration, seeking the full unredacted voter rolls. And we've talked about that before. There's the public version, which she offered to the Justice Department, but that's not what they wanted. They wanted the unredacted voter rolls, which includes a lot of personal information, possibly driver's licenses numbers, parts of social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, emails, all that stuff. And what the Justice Department wants to do is they want to run it against a federal database to try and find non-citizens who are registered to vote. You saw that President Trump claimed in his speech a couple of weeks ago that 250,000 Americans were found non-citizens were found on the voter rolls. I don't know where that number came from. It's not true, or at least there's no documentary evidence to back that up. But the Justice Department has sued a number of states and the District of Columbia. They've lost 20 of those. I suspect that Utah will be in one of the next ones to have the court case rejected. So she posted that today. Yesterday, she had this great thread where she said, if you want to rig an election, you don't need to hack machines or stuff ballot boxes. All you need to do is make it unnecessarily hard for eligible Americans to cast ballots or have their votes counted, suppress turnout by destroying public trust in elections through relentless, libelous attacks, harass and threaten good state and local election officials out of office, and try every which way to illegally and unconstitutionally exert federal control over elections. That's the playbook, folks. She posted that in response to a story about a group of states who sent a filing with the Supreme Court, who is, the Trump administration is asking to allow them to implement their restrictions on vote by mail. Even though the Supreme Court rejected a similar argument just a few weeks ago, or rejected some similar cases involving vote by mail just a month or so ago. But what the Trump administration is asking, even though this has been blocked by a lower court, they're saying, please let us implement these restrictions on vote by mail. And what those restrictions are is that this is why they're trying to get the full unredacted voter list, because they want to send these lists to the USPS, the Postal Service, and anybody who's not on that list, the Postal Service is not allowed to mail a ballot to them. And that's what they're trying to do. And even though the Postal Service says we don't have the capacity to implement that right now, it's too late to do that. There's not enough time to implement that. And even if we had enough time, it's not the kind of thing that we do. So a number of states sent a filing to the U.S. Supreme Court. Utah was not among them, but I'm guessing from the tone of this post that Lieutenant Governor Henderson wishes that Utah was one of them. She continues, but there's good news. You don't have to fall for it. Stay informed of the voting laws in your states. Check your own voter registration well in advance and make sure it's up to date. Vote early to avoid any potential disruption. If your state has text or email notifications about your ballot status, as Utah does, sign up for them. Take your vote into your own hands and make sure your family and friends do as well. We can keep the arc of history bending towards justice. Like I said, Deidre Henderson is absolutely killing it on social media. And I agree 100% with everything that she said. And she, she's pushing back. She's holding the line. As I said last week, I really wish we would get some public support for her from Governor Cox, or, you're not going to get it from any Republicans in the legislature. That would require political courage, and that is in short supply up there. Plus, Speaker Schultz is very close to the Trump administration. And so you're not going to get any pushback from the legislature. But you would think that maybe she would get some support from Governor Cox for putting her neck on the line like this. She's really stepping out on this. But kudos to her. Kudos to her. Kathy on YouTube says, I love Deidre Henderson. Can she beat John Curtis for governor? I don't know. John Curtis probably has the best name ID of anybody, any potential Republican candidate. And like I said before, if he runs, he's got a really good shot at winning. Ryan Hi-Fi on TikTok says Cox won't publicly support her because he's Trump's lapdog. He did, he has tried to get himself back into the MAGA fold after resisting as long as he could until the 2024 election, when he abruptly endorsed Trump and then was at the filming at Arlington National Cemetery that they turned into a campaign ad, which goes against everything that you're supposed to be doing there. But Spencer Cox was there. Ryan Hi-Fi says, I just joined, but out of curiosity, what does Charlie Kirk have to do with anything? We were talking earlier about how Senator Mike Lee posted on social media today that he basically invoked the name of Charlie Kirk, saying Charlie Kirk would want us to pass this bill, either put it in reconciliation or stay and work in Washington until it's passed. Which is gross. It's the second dead person that he has invoked in this. So he's invoked the dead people count that Senator Lee has brought up to try and push the passage of the SAVE Act. It's 2 right now: Lindsey Graham and Charlie Kirk. So anyway, so that's what that's about. Danette on TikTok says, so happy she's pushing back. Happy you're on Truth Social so I don't have to. Oh, I go on Truth Social from time to time. I like to see what the president is posting. That's really the only thing I pay attention to over there. Because the rest of it, it's just, the president created his own social media platform because he got kicked off of Twitter. If you remember that, that's why he did it. And now he's selling early access to his tweets to firms so they can make money because he knows his posts move markets. Anyway, hope you guys are staying cool out there. We have some alarming climate stuff that's happening. I don't know if you saw, but the Eagle Point Ski Resort in southern Utah, they're not going to be opening next year after the Cottonwood Fire. Get used to it, folks. That's going to become more and more common. Things like that. The planet is on fire and we are burying our heads in the sand, which is alarming. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about this evening? Oh, I wrote about this today. I thought this was very interesting. A judge, the federal judge here in Utah, Robert Shelby, the chief judge of the U.S. District Court, ruled today that the federal law does not preempt Utah's laws regulating gambling, basically ruled against Kalshi. Kalshi is a prediction app platform allowing people to they're claiming that is, it's like a market. You bet. You buy contracts for things that would happen in real life. For instance, who's going to win the presidential election in 2028? You can buy contracts on that. You can buy most of the time they're yes/no questions. One's not coming to mind right now, but perhaps say if the Utah Royals were playing someone, you could bet on the Royals were going to win, or you could buy contracts saying the other team was going to win. And then whatever happens when the contract resolves, whoever's holding the correct contract, they get paid out. And Kalshi sued Utah in February, and it was a preemptive lawsuit. They had sued a bunch of other states around the country who were trying to regulate what they were doing as gambling, because they were claiming it's not gambling because they are a commodity. Your users are trading commodities. It's not gambling because users are trading with each other, not against the house. The house only takes a cut of whatever the money is, and that's how they make their money. But and anybody can open up a market pretty much on anything. And they were claiming it's a commodity. It's not gambling. But Utah has a constitutional ban against gambling. Gambling's not allowed here. And there are sports markets on Kalshi. You can buy contracts, to use their terms, on Kalshi, which is essentially the same thing as sports betting. I mean, it's essentially sports betting. There's not a lot of difference from it. They just don't have odds. There aren't odds. There's not a bookmaker. You can't bet the over, under, or whatever. But you can buy these contracts, which is, if it's not sports gambling, it's pretty darn close to sports gambling. And that's not allowed here in Utah because we have a constitutional ban against it. Well, Kalshi was worried that Utah was going to take an enforcement action against them, block them from operating in the state. So they filed a preemptive lawsuit in February seeking a preliminary injunction to stop the state from enforcing their its anti-gambling laws, which would stop them from operating in the state. That's what they were trying to do in this lawsuit. And they argued that since they are a commodity, they are regulated by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and federal law trumps state law, which that's the supremacy clause. And so Utah's prohibitions on gambling don't count because that's a state law, and they are governed by a specific federal law. And Judge Selby did not buy it at all. Judge Selby ruled against Kalshi today and granted Utah's request for some summary judgment. Essentially just ruled against Kalshi, said the case is over, Utah wins. Kalshi can appeal. I haven't heard whether they're going to appeal or not, but Kalshi can appeal. They would appeal up to the 10th Circuit if they want to take this further. They've also sued a bunch of other states. I think that just this week they filed a preliminary or a preemptive lawsuit against New York. They've done it to a number of states. They filed lawsuits in a number of states, either trying to keep the states from enforcing their anti-gambling laws against them, or from or because they were trying to block state laws that were put in place to block Kalshi and other prediction markets like this. So the judge ruled against him. I think the judge got it right. Spencer Cox has talked about this a lot. He's correct. This is essentially gambling. And if you look at the things that gambling is such a plague right now, it is so bad. And young people are just very vulnerable to this. People lose a lot of money. You know, they just claim that they were different because the house is not involved. There's not odds makers. You're not betting against the house. You're betting against other users. Greg Scortis on Facebook says it's absolutely gambling, but it's regulated by the CFTC, so they think they are exempt from the gambling laws. And he said I explained that very, very well. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. But yes, that's the truth. That is, that's at the heart what Shelby ruled today. The company said its markets are regulated financial products, a commodity. And it's not betting because the users are trading with each other, not against the house. And it argued that the federal law gave the commodity futures, the CTFC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, gave them the exclusive ability to regulate them. And Judge Shelby did not buy that argument today. So we can talk about that. I'd like to get your thoughts. Troy Riley 477 on TikTok says, do you see this going to the 10th since the Trump family has interest in prediction markets? Oh yeah, I absolutely think that they're going to appeal this. I don't see why they wouldn't. And yes, the Trump family has some really big financial stakes. I think Eric Trump is an investor in Polymarket, or Don Jr. is an investor, and he's also on the board of Kalshi or something. Anyway, they've got a lot of financial interest in this, and then Truth Social has launched their own prediction market, where more people can lose money. You know. And the thing, as a journalist, this is the part that's really starting to gross me out, and it's pissing me off as well, is that people are looking at these prediction markets and they're treating them like polls, because you will and news organizations are literally citing these markets when in their news coverage. I think Substack has built it into their platform now, which is another reason why I'm not on Substack with my website. I mean, the first reason is there's a lot of Nazis on Substack, and I don't want to be a part of that. But the second reason, or another reason, it's not necessarily the second reason, but another reason is that they really want people to start looking at these prediction markets, which can be manipulated, as some sort of legitimate reporting tool. And I think that's gross. And people don't understand. We have a literacy crisis in America already, and people already don't understand polling. They don't understand how that works. But then you add in these prediction markets, and you've got legitimate news organizations saying, if you look at Kalshi, they have a 70% chance of winning. No, that means 70% of people have bought contracts for one side of this market, while 30% have bought the other market, the other side. That has nothing to do with the odds of somebody winning. This is just gambling. It's essentially gambling. And I think it is so gross when you see news organizations. They're just so desperate for any sort of content. They've cut back in their newsroom. They don't have reporters. It's all punditry now. And, there's not a lot of actual journalism happening. And so you get these discussion shows where people are yelling at each other for hours on end. And they need something to talk about. So they bring up the Kalshi markets and talk about, there are some primaries happening in Michigan tonight, and you can go on Kalshi right now. They're probably resolved right now, but you could go on Kalshi and you could buy one side or other of all these elections, trying to win money off of who wins these primary elections tonight. But that's not the same thing as actual scientific polling, which is expensive. So people don't understand that, but they look at this and I see, and you see Kalshi just trying, and all these prediction markets trying to get in with legitimate news organizations. I've been approached by some of them for a paid partnership. Do I want to, work with them? And they would pay me to produce some content, produce some social media videos. And I flat out told them no, that there's no way I would ever do anything like that, because it's dishonest. And then there was a great investigation, I believe it was by the Wall Street Journal, where they looked at all these people who were posting videos online about Kalshi, and they were lying. They were faking all these markets that they were talking about all this money that they won on Kalshi. But Kalshi came up with, according to this investigation, Kalshi made a dummy of their own website, a fake version of their own website. So it looked like their website, but it wasn't their website. And that's what these people were using in these ads, these social media videos, trying to get people to use the product. And they're pushing really hard right now. I mean, they see themselves as a disruptor. I quoted this in my article today, but on Monday, the CEO, Tarek Mansour, he was interviewed by CNBC, and he just said these lawsuits are just what a disruptive company goes through. He said, quote, "I think the more interesting thing that's at play here is that you have an industry, the prediction market industry, that is disruptive, that is growing fast. Consumers are adopting it, and it's threatening a legacy incumbent industry that is unhappy about that." I don't know what the legacy incumbent industry is, other than maybe it's like gambling or Las Vegas. And then he says that is played out over and over. It's played out with taxis and Uber. It's played out with hotels and Airbnb. The problem is Kalshi's not displacing another product. I don't understand his argument there. Katie Did It on YouTube says, then there's the loan that's offered when you can't cover your loss. Mafia straight up. There was an article, I wish I could remember who wrote it, a couple of months ago, just talking about young people in college age who are really sports betting apps, and some of the prediction markets, but they're mostly on the daily sport, on the sports betting apps like FanDuel and DraftKings, and just the amount of money that these young people are pumping into these apps. There's a reason why ESPN has their own betting app. There's a reason why, and they promote it. I remember 20 years ago, you wouldn't be caught. ESPN would not be promoting any sort of gambling, but they've got ESPN Bet. They've got their own betting app. Utah just passed a law this last year to ban daily prop bets. which is something that DraftKings and FanDuel were using to get around Utah's ban on gambling. Because what you did is you had daily fantasy. Daily fantasy is, you pick a certain number of players each day for a game, and then you win or lose based on that against another person. It's the same thing as you see in these prediction markets. You're betting against other people in the pool, not against the house. And the prop bets are the same thing. It's almost the same thing as they were doing with Kalshi. And so they lost in court here. And I think this is one of the first ones that they lost. And this now is going to set the tone for a lot of other courts around the country, because as I've said, Kalshi has filed a number of these lawsuits. But Utah, we were the first one that they preemptively sued because they were worried that the state was going to take action against them. And spoiler alert, they were. They were getting ready to sue them and force them out of the state. Well, right now they cannot operate in the state. They can't do that. Kathy on YouTube says disruptive or more like addictive. Yes, they are very addictive. Very addictive. And there was another article, I think it was the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, just within the last couple of weeks. There was a guy who was a big-time sports bettor on one of the apps. Like, he spent thousands of dollars. And they got a Major League Baseball player to record a personal video for him to keep him engaged on the app because he was betting so much money. And this Major League Baseball player, there's a lot of controversy around it, recorded, and I'm not into baseball, so I can't remember the guy's name, but I know he was a pretty prominent player. But they got a hold of this video that was sent to this guy, personalized video, encouraging him to keep betting on the app. And things got so bad for this guy. I think he lost his life savings. He ended up trying to take his own life. Fortunately, he wasn't successful. He's getting help right now. But that's what these apps do. They've gamified everything. And, you read all these accounts and it just seems extremely easy for people to get addicted to it. Danette on TikTok asks, so how is Coinbase legal? Don't even ask me about crypto. I don't know how that works at all. All I know is that a lot of people lose a lot of money. You saw that Trump with his meme coins, and go watch the Last Week Tonight with John Oliver segment. He did this last week about Trump's crypto. It's really well done. It explains everything. But what happened was, Trump launched these meme coins, and he ended up making like $1.2 billion off of it, and the investors lost almost the same amount of money. That's all I need to know right there to stay away from this stuff. Elliot Nutter said, tuned into any national election news tonight. I was watching Steve Kornacki, but got kind of bored. I'm just trying to watch. I don't have it on here. I probably should. I should probably turn on some of these election coverage. One of the places that I really like to go, I like to Decision Desk HQ. I'll bring that up. You can find them at decisiondeskhq.substack.com, and they have a live stream tonight where they're talking about what is happening in Michigan, but they also have live results. I'm looking right now. They're talking about the governor. They got Chuck Todd, who's part of the discussion. Also, Chris Cillizza is part of it as well. But that their socials are a good way to keep up on what's happening with the elections. And they call elections much sooner than a lot of the networks do. So I'm trying to watch and see what else they have to say about this, but I'm not really seeing anything other than that. Just waiting for them to flash up some more graphics. But they do a good job. So I would go to Decision Desk HQ if you're looking to keep up and you don't want to watch the regular network coverage, because I think that they do a great job. So enough on Kalshi, enough on gambling. I'll take a drink here. So they lost. So they lost in court. Now they'll probably going to appeal, because there is so much money to be made in these things. There's so much money. There's also a lot of money to be lost. People lose a lot of money, and I just stay away. It doesn't appeal to me. Gambling in Las Vegas has never appealed to me. Just not something that I find interesting. There are people who do. It's just not my thing. So, let's talk a little bit about Senator John Curtis. Today, he came out and said that he would support Todd Blanche's nomination to become Attorney General. Todd Blanche, his nomination in the Senate Judiciary Committee was stalled by John Cornyn, and the other name is escaping me, but he was stalled in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Essentially, these senators wanted assurances from him that this $1.8 trillion slush fund that they were trying to create for President Trump to pay off the January 6th insurrectionists, because that's essentially what this was going to do, they wanted assurances that it was going to be dead. And he said that they were no longer going to pursue it, but that's not the case, because in the deal that was struck between Trump and the DOJ, it said that any changes have to be in writing, and there was nothing in writing. And Trump has to agree to it as well, and he hasn't. And meanwhile, his team has also appealed a court ruling not striking this thing down. So I don't think that slush fund is dead. But apparently it was enough of an assurance from Todd Blanche to get his nomination out of the Judiciary Committee. And now it goes to the full floor of the Senate. I expect him to be confirmed. Tonight you saw Senator Susan Collins of Maine come out and say that she would not vote to confirm him, and a lot of and that's what she uses to burnish her credentials as an independent thinker in the Senate. But I was talking with someone about this, and they said Susan Collins has never voted against the Republicans when they needed her vote, and this tells me they don't need her vote. She's in a tough re-election bid in Maine. And I think Republicans have enough to confirm Todd Blanche. And so they don't need her vote. So she can now vote against it, as she said, which is she's going to do. But John Curtis today came out and said that he would support Todd Blanche as AG. I thought that was interesting. He's done this a number of times before where he has said that he would support nominees and then, see how well that's worked out for him since he's been in the Senate. Also, Curtis, he's got a little backlash from conservatives this week when he introduced a bill to create a voluntary state-sponsored visa program which would allow legislatures to expand a state's temporary migrant workforce. I'm bringing this up on social media because he posted something this evening. I don't see it. Anyway, John Curtis was talking about his response to that. But he's getting a lot of flack from conservatives for this bill that he has proposed. And it would allow legislatures to vote to expand temporary visas for the migrant workforce to fill out, when there's a need for it. And conservatives are very, very angry about that. Like, he's getting a lot of backlash from this idea. But the interesting thing is, this is an idea that was originally, not completely, but it was pretty much proposed in the 2011 Utah Compact on immigration. And that was seen as a groundbreaking proposal at the time. And here we are 15 years later, and now John Curtis is getting a lot of flack for trying to propose the exact same thing in this bill. I've got Governor Spencer Cox. He came out today and he said that he's going to co-lead in a National Governors Association task force to propose some policy solutions to balance immigration enforcement with economic demands. You always hear people say stuff like, Congress has been unable to solve the immigration problem for 40 years. Yeah, they haven't been able to. And you can talk about however they might, you can talk about for whatever reason. Some people have argued that, Congress doesn't want to solve the immigration problem because it allows people, it gives them an issue that they can demagogue and campaign on. I don't know. I can't comment on that, but I've heard that theory for years. It's a very difficult issue to try and address. And I wish Governor Cox luck with this task force he's going to co-lead, trying to come up with solutions. If you think that Congress is going to get it done, you have much more hope than I do, because this has been a spectacularly unproductive Congress. And, if Democrats gain control of either of the houses after the midterms, they are favored to take over the House of Representatives, just how bad the polling has been. Not huge favorites, not heavy favorites, but they are favored. And some people have been talking about how the Democrats could have an outside chance of taking over the Senate. If they get either one of the houses, we will not have immigration reform in the next 2 years. That'll essentially be the end of the Trump presidency, because they'll be spending the next 2 years, fending off investigations, and nothing will get done. Kathy on YouTube says, "Whatever happened to Republican support for state rights?" Well, it's malleable. It depends on, what's rights we're talking about with the states. It depends. They're all for federalism until, a state that they don't like does something in the name of federalism. It's very, very malleable. Vote for Stephen Burton reminds me that it was Senator Tom Tillis was the other holdout on the Senate Judiciary Committee, but now they have moved that forward. Greg Skordas on Facebook says, Senator Curtis's bill seems to be an expansion of the temporary work visa program. He has a Democrat co-sponsor, Senator Kelly from Arizona, I think. But he is getting pilloried by the let's just say the more xenophobic wing of the Republican Party, the no immigration at all wing of the Republican Party. They are not happy. And Greg Skorda says, believe it or not, Senator Lee is proposing a bill that would allow adoptees to be U.S. citizens. Yeah, we did see that. I saw that earlier this week. I'm going to have to dig into that a little bit more. But the top line kind of surprised me that Senator Lee would be proposing that, given how he has decided that he's going to be a hardliner when it comes to immigration. I don't know about you. I saw this article. This has been reported in a number of places. Someone says, is it just me or is the volume low? I can bring that up a little bit. I'm trying to not overdrive it, but hopefully that's a little bit better. This might be even better. Okay, I brought it up. Sorry. Thanks for the reminder. Hopefully this is a little bit better. But there's some news that former special counsel Jack Smith has been invited to testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee as part of their review of the Biden administration's investigation of the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot. So they're going to, the Republicans are going to review the previous review of the Capitol riot, which, I'm sure that that's going to be above board and probing and completely honest. But anyway, Jack Smith has been invited to appear. And the thing that I understand, I'm not going to say I'm looking forward to it, but I know how this is going to go. You'll have Senator Mike Lee once again screaming. It'll give him a chance to scream about his text messages being subpoenaed by the Department of Justice, by Smith and his team during their investigation of the January 6 riot. Senator Mike Lee was one of the senators, one of the lawmakers who had their phone records pulled, his text messages. And oh boy, I bet I bet Senator Lee is just itching for that opportunity to yell about privacy, invasion of privacy with Jack Smith, for having the temerity to get his text messages, to obtain his text messages. Ignoring the fact that he was in the thick of the whole planning process right up until the very end. Remember, he was working 20 hours a day to try and find a way for President Trump to undo his loss to Joe Biden in 2020. And when Lee has been really upset about this ever since he found out that Smith's team subpoenaed his phone records. And you just know that the histrionics from Lee are going to be epic. I kind of don't want to watch that. I'm kind of hoping that Smith does not accept their invitation, because we saw what happened with Jack Smith. We saw what happened with Dr. Fauci this last week, where you had the most dishonest questioning of him, and he wisely took the Fifth Amendment, invoked the Fifth Amendment. I have been arguing with the dumbest people on the planet on Facebook. I probably shouldn't be doing that sometimes. I can't help myself. But yes, I've spent the last few days arguing with some of the dumbest people on the planet on Facebook about why Fauci took the Fifth Amendment. Because it's his constitutional right. And everyone knows what Rand Paul was trying to do. That was just political theater. Rand Paul was hoping to get Fauci has already testified dozens of times before Congress about the response to COVID. They've got all this stuff on the record. And what Rand Paul, super genius, was trying to do is he was trying to get Fauci to say something different than he did previously. He was trying to get him to perjure himself. And then they were going to prosecute him for perjury. And Rand Paul was so mad that Fauci would not play his game. Fauci would not play along. That's why he took the Fifth Amendment. And these dum-dums are all like, well, Fauci has nothing to hide. He was already pardoned. The pardon would not cover being prosecuted for perjury. It would not cover that. So he's allowed to do this. I swear, the dumbest people online. But it was all political theater. That's why now Rand Paul is trying to get a committee vote on holding Fauci in contempt of Congress. And so that's why I think that Jack Smith should not accept the invitation. But if he does, I think Mike Lee might blow a vein in his forehead. Because he was so mad when he found out that his text messages were obtained, his phone records were subpoenaed as part of the investigation. Why do you think that is, Senator Lee? Why do you think your phone records were subpoenaed? Were you possibly doing something around that time leading up to the mob attacking the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to overturn President Trump's election loss, in an attempt to illegally keep him in power? Were you doing something that might have caught Jack Smith's attention? Possibly. I think it's a fair question. You won't answer questions about it. You've never fully explained what you were exactly doing. But maybe, just maybe, he had a reason to subpoena your phone records. Why do you think that is? Maybe you did something that got his attention. Kathy on YouTube says, Rand Paul never passed his ophthalmology boards. That's not quite the story. The story is he is an ophthalmologist, but there's an accreditation board. When you see board certified ophthalmologist. My wife she is a board certified professional in her field. But he did not like the paperwork. He did not like all the hoops that he had to jump through to become certified by this ophthalmology board. So what he did was he just created his own. He just came up with his own ophthalmology board. He made it up. It was him and a bunch of some of his friends. And that's how he was certified as an ophthalmologist. I think they got sued or something and they got shut down. But that's what he was doing. So, Spence Cuddy on TikTok calls this the Darvo hearing. Yeah, that would absolutely be the Darvo hearing. Having Jack Smith come and talk about his investigation in January 6th. Yes, that is 100% the Darvo hearing. Troy Riley, and this is another point with Fauci's pardon. Pardons don't cover state crimes. They don't. So Fauci was 100% correct. His lawyers were correct to advise him to invoke the Fifth Amendment because he was going to be baited into doing something that would open him up for prosecution. Because if you remember, I mean, they've been screaming that they want to put Fauci in jail. And I just have to think, man, if this Fauci guy screwed up COVID so bad, who was his boss at the time? I mean, who was his boss? If he screwed up the response to COVID so bad, who was his boss back then? Was it, oh, that's right, it was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was his boss when he screwed it up. Yeah. But it's all part of this desperate attempt to rewrite the history of COVID. Republicans don't want to acknowledge that they were actually in charge. Republicans don't want to acknowledge that they were in charge when this whole thing went down. Anyway, looking at some of the comments in the chat here, there's Kathy is really going after Rand Paul. She says, I checked and Paul never kept up with the CMEs, and I know people were on the Haiti humanitarian trip with Paul, and they said all he did was pose for photo ops with while the rest of them worked. Yeah, Rand Paul, I mean, occasionally I will agree with him, but I never agreed with his father, Ron Paul. I never got the appeal of Ron Paul. But, you know, there are a lot of people out there who really appreciate him and really believe in him, but I just never got it. So anyway, part of me is hoping that Jack Smith turns down this invitation to testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee because, again, all it's going to be is political theater. It's just a chance for people to yell, just a chance for Republicans to yell and for Democrats to ask questions that would allow Jack Smith to once again point out that all of the evidence he had just basically showed Donald Trump's culpability in this whole thing. But the other half of me is like, you know, if he does, Senator Mike Lee might have an aneurysm. And that, you know, just his emotional response to having Jack Smith in front of him and being able to ask questions about or being able to yell about why his phone records were subpoenaed. You know, that might be interesting. So, anyway, that was on my rundown tonight. If you have anything you want to talk about, please leave it in the chat. I'd love to hear your comments. Let's see. I'm trying to look here, see if there's other things to talk about. Not necessarily about Utah, but I thought this was fascinating. Bloomberg reported today that the UFC, that fight they had on the White House lawn for Trump's birthday, lost $30 million. They lost $30 million because of that fight. Although they're saying, you know, it gave him greater exposure. I don't think I've ever watched a UFC fight. In fact, I remembered when I was a young reporter in Denver. This was back probably 92, 93, somewhere around there. I was working at a news talk radio station in Denver. And this was when Ultimate Fighting was first started. And it was brutal. Like, it was a brutal sport. It was not anything like it is today. It was sort of really... it's kind of dirty, you know, and they wanted to have an Ultimate Fighting event in Denver. And The mayor banned them. The mayor would not allow them to hold the fight. I remember that distinctly, and I think that's the closest I've ever gotten to one of these events. They just don't appeal to me. I'm sure some people enjoy that. Some people like combat sports. That's fine. But, my experience with it is, and I remember this a long time ago, like, again, it was many, many years ago, but the mayor of Denver there was negotiations going back and forth between both organizations, and finally the mayor of Denver, at the time, I think it might have been Wellington Webb, although it might have been Pena. No, Pena, it might have been Wellington Webb. Anyway, the mayor of Denver would not give them a license, would not allow them to have the event in Denver. But they had one on the White House lawn, and they lost $30 million. But they're going to make it up with exposure, exposure and prestige. I don't know if they're going to bring any new fans into the sport. Like when sports are talking about trying to expand their fan base, one thing that's really making me laugh about, I thought that this World Cup was fantastic. This year's World Cup was great. The World Cup is always a good time. And I see these people online who are saying, I'm just getting into soccer and I want to start watching soccer. Club soccer, the big clubs, it is so much different than the World Cup. The vibes are different. The games are different. If you want to be a Premier League fan, you got to be like me and get up at 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday to watch matches. My son lives down in Arizona. He's a big Arsenal fan. There's an Arsenal bar down there that he goes to watch the matches. And sometimes the games kick off at 3 in the morning Arizona time. And they have to hold a private event at the bar in order to open it up. But they do. You've got to be dedicated. It is not as easy to become a soccer fan, a fan of football, as it was in the World Cup. The games were at a reasonable hour here in America. I mean, a lot of them were in the middle of the day, but you didn't have to get up at an ungodly hour to watch them. That was a lot of fun. But you gotta really be dedicated to be a soccer fan. I am a Premier League degenerate. I love it. And they come back in 15 days, 20 days, a week from Friday, 2 weeks from Friday, maybe 3 weeks from Friday. I think it's 2 weeks from Friday. But anyway, it is different. And everyone's like, well, maybe I'll become a fan of MLS. Man, the quality, you will notice a very distinct drop-off in quality. And a very distinct drop-off in quality between the World Cup and MLS. We really, you're going to notice a big drop-off in that quality. I remember a couple of years ago, my wife and I were out in San Francisco visiting my brother. And at the time, there was an international friendly. The big European clubs come over here and play friendlies. And it was AC Milan and FC Barcelona playing at Levi Stadium. It was fun to go. Neither team had their starters. I think they were just, a lot of the starters had played in an international tournament, maybe the Euros a couple of years ago. So they were not playing. It was a lot of their reserves, a lot of their younger players. And I watch a lot of soccer, and my wife, who's sort of extremely casually watching it, she noticed that the quality of just the reserves of these big European clubs was so much better than what you see in MLS. MLS is getting better, but it's certainly not a top league. Although I was excited to see that one of Real Salt Lake's young players, I'm trying to find the name here. One of Real Salt Lake's young players, Xavier Gozo, young player. I think he's in his teens right now. He might be 18 or 19. A young, exciting player. He's just about to transfer over to Crystal Palace in the Premier League. 15, right there. Kathy was about the same thing. Did you know that Xavier Gozo might be going to Crystal Palace? I think that's great. I think you have to go to Europe if you want to play. Yeah. I think it's great. And that's going to be a $15 million transfer fee. A transfer fee is, and this is another reason why U.S. soccer is so screwed up. Because what happens in everywhere else in the world, if teams have to pay a transfer fee to another club in order to get a player who's under contract or when they sign a player. And what happens is every team that player has played for gets a cut. So you see these small clubs in European countries, what they do is they develop players. And then like Xavier Gozo for Real Salt Lake, they go to a bigger club, the club pays a transfer fee, and the club that initially developed him gets a cut. And that's how they fund going forward. And that's how these clubs survive. U.S. Soccer does not do that. U.S. Soccer, I think Real Salt Lake will keep a lot of the money, but U.S. Soccer is going to keep the rest of it. And none of the clubs below that, none of the youth soccer. Everyone talks about, that it costs too much money to play soccer in the United States for club soccer. Yeah, it is expensive for youth soccer. You could fix it if U.S. Soccer would allow, these transfer fees to go to the smaller clubs, but they don't. Anyway, off on my soccer rant. Enough of that for the evening. All right, let's see what else we have here. A lot of people are talking about my interview with Dr. Jacob Rue that I did last week, talking about whether or not Utah is going to turn blue. He's seeing some signs that Utah may be shifting a little bit towards the Democratic, towards the Democrats, breaking up the Republican supermajority. I mean, it's not going to flip on a dime. Utah's not going to vote for a presidential candidate, a Democratic presidential candidate, unless something really changes. But, Colorado went from a red state to a purple state, then a blue state in about 20 years. But over the last 20 years, what Dr. Rue is saying is that he's seen that from 2004 to 2024, Utah has swung the most towards the Democrats in terms of the vote. He and I disagreed a little bit on that. I thought a lot of that was the Trump factor. Utah is not the bastion of Trump support that a lot of people seem to think it is. But I would encourage you to go listen to that interview. It's on my podcast. You can find that at a special session. The name of the podcast is Special Session with Brian Schott. It's also on the Utah Political Watch YouTube channel. And there's a lively discussion going on about that right now on YouTube. So if you have some time, I would go watch that. Let's see. Asphalt Andy on TikTok says, how confident are you in Ben McAdams? We all know he's probably going to win. Do you think he'll be a pushover Dem or an actual fighter? I think your definition of a fighter might differ from my definition of a fighter. I've known Ben McAdams for quite a long time. I mean, I've covered him when he was in the legislature. I covered him when he was mayor of Salt Lake County and then when he went to Congress. So, I've been familiar with Ben McAdams for quite a while. And he's been pretty consistent. Now, one of the things that happened, he gets a lot of criticism when he was in Congress the last time. But he was the district he represented was one of the most Republican districts in the country. He managed to flip it because there was a wave election in that year in 2018. And remember, he didn't win it by much, but he managed to flip it. And so a lot of his votes reflected the partisan makeup of that district. Now he is the odds-on favorite to win in the 1st Congressional District, the brand new 1st Congressional District, which again, the 1st Congressional District is not a solid blue district. It is still, the largest block is independent voters, followed by Republicans, followed by Democrats. So he cannot be a progressive. And I don't think the district wanted him to be a progressive because there were 3 progressives in the race. And if you add up their votes in the primary, they did not get a majority. McAdams was able to get a majority. I mean, he got about just under 52% of the vote, but it was a majority. So I don't think the district wants him to be a progressive. And so that is going to become, I think he fits this new district, the makeup of it well. Because you have in this district, the reason why it would have gone for Kamala Harris by about 23 points in 2024 is because Republicans voted for her and independents voted for her. You can't win the district by just relying on completely on Democratic votes. You just can't. So Republicans voted for her. Independents voted for her. Same thing in 2020. This district would have been carried by Joe Biden by about 20-some points over Donald Trump. Again, that would have required Republicans and independents to vote for him. And they did in this area. So, it's not a rock-solid blue district. McAdams is the odds-on favorite to win, because I don't think there's any way this district is going to elect a Republican unless, the Democratic nominee would have been completely unacceptable. Asphalt Andy says, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I hope that does make sense. I think when you look at what happened in the race for the Democratic nomination, everybody had their own theory of the race. And I know that Ben McAdams people were very confident. And they presented one vision of this race, and their vision was, sort of a centrist Democrat, which McAdams has always been. And he was going up against three people who felt that the correct path was to be a progressive. And in the end, their theory was not as persuasive or was not correct. McAdams' theory was correct. That's how these things work out. Back to the pardon issue, Greg Skordas, who is a lawyer, by the way, he backs me up. He says, pardons don't include crimes you have not committed yet either, so you are correct. Fauci had no choice but to assert the Fifth Amendment. Rand Paul was absolutely trying to bait Fauci. Yeah, that was the whole plan. It was pretty transparent. And that's why he was so mad that Fauci would not take the bait, would not play along with him. A couple of other headlines I thought really interesting this week. Utah produced more power from solar than any other source in May. That's encouraging. We still need a lot of electricity. Our power needs are growing. That's why lawmakers are so fixated on trying to come up with new power sources. But the fact that more power was created through solar than any other source, that is encouraging. I've got a lot of solar at my house. I've also got solar batteries for a backup. And believe me, they have saved me a couple times. There have been times in my neighborhood where we've had a power outage, and I didn't even realize it. We just keep chugging along and realize the power had been out. One of the best investments we've ever made. I also saw a story, I think this was in the Salt Lake Tribune, that the charter school, American Preparatory Academy, they're trying to keep the salaries of their executives secret. That's a public school, people. But they're trying to keep the salaries of their executives from becoming public. That is alarming to me. That is a very alarming thing to me. Asphalt Andy says, yeah, I guess I didn't factor in the district as a whole, the 1st Congressional District, and expected it to be more progressive. Yeah, there are pockets of progressivism, but it's not... If you just straight voter registration numbers, and I'm not going to fight about people who are claiming that there's a whole bunch of Democrats registered as Republicans. That's just not true. But right now, the latest numbers I've seen, independents make up about 35% of the voters. Republicans make up about 34%, and Democrats make up 24%. I've long said this about Democrats winning races in Utah, right? Unless the district is overwhelmingly Republican, and there are very few districts, there are a few legislative seats where Democrats outnumber everybody else. But in all of the other seats, Democrats, they not only have to get all of the Republican, let me start again. Democrats not only have to get all the Democrats in the district to vote for them, but they also need to get a lot of independents and even some Republicans to cross over. That's how Ben McAdams won in 2018. That's how he won. And so this district, it's still mostly independents and Republicans. Democrats still have to climb that hill. They still need to get independents and Republicans to vote for them, but they don't start as far behind. Under the old maps, the maps that the judge threw out that were passed by the legislature 2021, like Republicans were at 50% or so in all the districts, and Democrats were maybe at 25 or 30%. So that's a 25 or 20% hill that they have to climb. Here in the first district, the brand new first district, it's only 10%. So they still have to climb that hill, but it's just not as hard. They don't start as far behind. Nathan Detroit on Twitch says, I'm sad that residential solar has essentially stopped in Utah between high interest rates for loans and the sunsetting of tax credits, installation of new residential solar. Yeah. And the sad thing is solar's getting really good. Like we had our panels put in a few years ago. And the new panels are really good. And like I said, we have some battery backups that were. It's a company here in Utah that does our system. It's Lion Energy, and they do a number of. That's my dog Daisy growling. She sees her reflection in things, and she growls. She doesn't understand that that's her. You hear that? Yeah, that's her. She's looking at her reflection, I think, in one of the arcade cabinets. Anyway, kind of cute. But anyway, Lion Energy, who makes our battery backup, they're a company here in Utah. When we first did this, I was having lunch with my cousin and talking about this, and he's worked in this energy space for a long time. Like he's worked in energy production for a long time. I think oil and a lot of the other places. And he was actually in town to meet with Lion Energy, and I told him that we had put in solar in this battery backup. And he said, what is the break even? I mean, when are you going to break even? I said, that's not the point. I don't know if we'll ever break even, but we will have power when there's a power outage. We have a reserve. And during the summer, when it's really bright outside, our battery fills up all day, and then it just slowly trickles down at night, which is the point of the whole thing. So let's see. Philly Sports on TikTok says, what's your political stance? I'm new here. Well, I'm a journalist. I'm an independent journalist. I don't have a political stance. I've covered Utah politics for 25 years or so, or even more than that. And so that's my stance. Is I don't have a political stance. I'm not coming at this from a particular bent at all. I'm an independent journalist. I've covered Utah politics for several decades, and I see my job is to try to help people understand what's happening in Utah politics. But thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you having you there. I think that's about it. Everything I wanted to talk about tonight. No. Last thing. Really interesting. A lot of reporting this week about how this Medicaid work requirement that was part of the Big Beautiful Act that was passed by Congress last year. Now people who want to get Medicaid, most people have to, there's a work requirement. You have to work a certain number of hours a week. And if you don't, then you do not receive Medicaid. It's something Utah's been wanting to do for years. The legislature has been trying to do this for years. It's part of their Utah way of doing things. I think they even trying to do this. I mean, when Medicaid expansion was first on the table, when we were talking about the Affordable Care Act, then Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox was sort of heading up the state's response to this. And they asked the Obama administration for a waiver. They came up with a thing, I believe it was called Healthy Utah. And it had a Medicaid work requirement, and the Obama administration said, no, you can't do that. That's why there was a ballot initiative in 2018, because the state was not expanding Medicaid, and they were trying to force the state to do it under the Affordable Care Act. And even then, after it passed, the legislature changed the law drastically, put in a whole bunch of triggers that if the funding ever went away, then we would drop the program. But anyway, so this work requirement that Utah has long wanted for Medicaid is going into effect in 2027. This new rule. And there are some estimates that about 40,000 Utahns will probably be without health care because of these work requirements that are going to affect in 2027. A lot of them have already been notified, but they won't qualify. Now, people are disabled. I mean, there's disabled, I think, expectant mothers. There are some exceptions, but not a lot. But officials here in Utah estimate that there will probably be about 40,000 Utahns who will no longer be eligible to get Medicaid because of these new rules. So, something to think about if you have any thoughts or comments on that. I just know this is something Utah's been trying to do for years. They have wanted to have this Medicaid requirement, this requirement for people to, have to work in order to receive these benefits. They've been pushing this for years. This is something the legislature's wanted for a long time, and they're finally going to get it. They actually had, they initially asked for a waiver from the Obama administration. They were told no. Then when Trump came into the White House, they were told yes. And then when Biden came into the White House, they were again told no. And now it just got passed as part of the big, beautiful bill. And what it's going to lead to is about 40,000 Utahns who are no longer going to have health insurance because of these work requirements. We just learned that this week. So I think that's going to do it for me. We've been on for about an hour and a half this evening. If anything happens, I probably won't be doing this tomorrow night, no matter what happens, because the new Ted Lasso comes out. And I'm very excited about that show. Very, very excited about that. But if anything else happens this week, we'll probably have another live stream where we can talk about it and go over those issues. So if you want to find out if we're having a live stream, when we're having a live stream, the easiest way to do that, there are a couple things you can do. One, just give me a follow on whatever app you're watching on, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're live on all those channels tonight. Drop a follow. That's the easiest way to keep up with what we're doing. The second thing to do is to go to my website, utahpolitics.news, sign up for my newsletter. You'll get an email whenever I publish a new story. Most of my journalism is absolutely free. But if you want to make more live streams like this possible, if you want to make more of my journalism possible, podcasts, things like that, you can do a couple of things. You can become a paid subscriber. That's $55 a year, and that helps support everything that we do. And if you don't want a subscription, I completely understand that. You can throw some money in the tip jar, and that's also on my website. It's easy to find. It's utahpolitics.news. I'm 100% reader funded. I have no corporations backing this. I have no billionaires writing me checks. It's reader funded. The people who use the information that I provide are the ones who make it possible. And I'm so thankful for them. And you can become one of them. So remember, drop a follow on whatever app you're watching on, whatever platform you're watching on. And then you can also you can also go to my website, utahpolitics.news. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for this evening. I appreciate everybody tuning in this evening. A couple of last minute comments on Facebook. Alyssa Knighton says the work requirement is per month, not per week, but the amount of time they would have to work would likely make them ineligible to receive Medicaid. Yeah, if I said it was per week, I apologize. It is per month. But the requirements would make people ineligible. They aren't able to work that much, or they are unable to find work. And Darby Allison says we should try getting the state tax off of Social Security. They've worked on that for a number of years, and I think they've reduced that quite a bit over the last few years. But I think there is still some tax on Social Security, but I completely understand that. But anyway, thank you for your eyeballs tonight, your attention. If you missed any of this, I'll put this out as a podcast tomorrow. Podcast is called Special Session with Brian Schott. But until then, remember, go to my website, utahpolitics.news. Drop a follow wherever you're watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and we will talk to you again soon.